Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the channel. I'm Brad. This is Q Branch Woodworks. Today we're going to be turning... Oh my goodness, that was awesome. Okay, today we're going to be turning this big slab of rough chainsaw walnut into 2 bowls for my client. Now, unfortunately, this bowl isn't as large as I would have liked to have made it. There was a little bit of bug-eaten walnut on one side, so I decided rather than using the entire diameter, I would just make 2 bowls from this slab. As usual, the move is remove as much mass as possible. Now, one of the issues that I ran into in the making of this bowl was that there were large chainsaw marks on the front, which prevented it from sitting flat on the chuck. While I was busy figuring this out, the bowl was starting to introduce a little bit of wobble, and this was exacerbated when I pulled the live center away. The vibration will start right around here as I'm trying to actually put the mortise in the bottom of the bowl. Essentially, at this point, I'm just trying to power through it, even though I know that that's not the smartest thing to do. In short order, though, I decided to just get the mortise down and go ahead and flip this thing around so that I can get a nice, clean, flat surface for the chuck to rest on. You can see in the video just how deep those ridges are and why that might have been contributing to the chuck not sitting flat. All I'm doing here is stopping every so often to make sure that I'm clearing the area that will be occupied by the chuck face of all of those deep chainsaw marks. Now that I feel that this bowl is in a safe place again, I feel comfortable remounting it. As you can see, there's a little bit of wobble. The mortise is no longer concentric, so it requires a little bit of a touch-up to set the foot properly. The style of foot that I've been doing a lot recently is I rebait that foot ever so slightly, and then I put a couple of beads in the bottom. Basically just trying to spice things up and make sure that it's not just a perfectly flat surface, which I think can be a little bit dull. And now some nice flowing finishing cuts on the outside. This is the best part of any bowl. Off camera, I filled some cracks with CA glue just to make sure that they were stable. Then it's on to sanding and some light finishing. The finish that I'm using is tung oil, beeswax, and Carnauba wax. The recipe for this finish says that it's supposed to come out to the consistency of a salve, but since I'm not an apothecary and I don't know what that means, I went for something that was just a little bit looser than chapstick. I slather on a generous helping, buff it in, making sure to generate as much heat as I can, and then go ahead and buff it off. It leaves a beautiful sheen, and you can really see the curl that's starting to appear in this walnut. Now, time to demount, reverse, and start work on the inside. I'm stopping somewhat frequently here to make sure that I'm actually getting to a point where I'm getting rid of all of those deep chainsaw marks. Once I'm sure about the depth that I have set on the outside, then I can start working on removing material from the inside. By the way, I usually send these videos to my clients, so I just want to give a quick shout out and say, hi Yvonne and family, potential recipients of these gifts. I hope that you enjoy them. Now, for the turners in the group, I've been working on this formula that we all use to price our bowls, which seems to be width times depth times some sort of multiple. But I think that a more effective formula that we could potentially use is to square the radius and then multiply that by the depth of the blank. I think that this new formula does a better job of taking into account just how much extra wood it is for every inch that you add in diameter over about 10 inches. If you have a favorite or different method for pricing your work, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. After a light sanding, all the way up to about 600 grit, I go ahead and apply a little bit more of this wax with the power on. Sometimes it's fun to get a blank that's a little bit rough on the surface because you don't actually know what's inside. This one was a lovely surprise. Now that it's finished, I can go ahead and demount it and start working on the smaller of the 2 pieces. This is going to follow the exact same procedure. I mount it on a woodworm, get the outside nice and round, nice smooth finishing cuts around the outside, and I'm going to try to set the exact same foot that I have on the other 2 pieces that came from this tree. I think that this should give the 3-piece set a nice continuity. I rebait the foot towards the center slightly, set a couple of beads on the inside and one on the rim. I also round the corner of the mortise slightly just to disguise it a bit. A couple more long, smooth finishing cuts determine the outside shape. Then, you guessed it, more sanding and finishing. Once again, all I'm looking for on this initial series of cuts is to make sure that I'm getting underneath those deep chainsaw marks. I am losing a little bit of height, but I'm making sure that I'm not going to leave any uneven surfaces on the rim. After the size of the last piece, the smaller one feels like an absolute cakewalk. Bone dry walnut isn't usually my favorite wood to turn, but whatever this tree had going for it, this was an absolute pleasure. Once the wall started getting this thin, I started to encounter a little bit of vibration, which is fairly common once you start removing the bulk of the material from the middle. I varied the speed a little bit, touched up the edges on my gouges, but I think any of you who watch my live streams know I'm not afraid to get in there with my favorite wood turning tool, the 120 grit gouge. Now that I've applied some finish, it's time to see what all 3 of these pieces look like in sequence. So there's the small one we just finished, there's the medium one from the beginning of this bowl, and here is the large piece. The link to the short for this video will be in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please consider subscribing.